Hey there, Nexters. Welcome in. Nothing I like more than when I'm out and about and someone comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder and says, I'm a Nexter. Sometimes they whisper it, sometimes they're loud and proud, but either way, glad to know. Members of the community, thank you for your service to America. Welcome. This is Tuesday, or what I call just another day, and another episode of Next Up. I'm Mark Halperin, editor-in-chief of the live interactive video platform Two Way, host of this program. I bring you my exclusive reporting and analysis of all the top stories that matter most right now and what is coming next up. Joining us today, two great guests. The return of Mr. Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show from the Daily Wire. Michael and I are going to talk about Charlie Kirk and about Israel and a bunch of other stuff, so stay tuned for that. And then Doug Sosnik will be here. He is a brilliant Democratic strategist, was a longtime advisor to Bill Clinton, and someone who understands the rhythms of American politics as well as anyone I know, and is not afraid to call out Democrats when he thinks they've lost their way. That conversation coming as well. But first up, next up, my reported monologue on a very big media story that has implications, I think, for the whole country. It's about the media, but it's about more than that. It's a story in some ways about two people. I'll tell you who they are in a moment. I've been talking for the last several weeks based on the rumors that this was coming true, something that did come true. Bari Weiss taking over the editor-in-chief role of CBS News. I've talked to journalists, political people in both parties. Some of them get what's going on, and they've helped inform my views today. Some of whom definitely do not, and they've informed my views as well. David Ellison, very wealthy purchaser, a new CEO of Paramount Skydance, hired Bari Weiss, who I'm friendly with, to be the editor-in-chief of CBS News. And Bari has done this on the strength of the extraordinary success she's had at the Free Press. You've seen her on Megyn's show. You've seen her own video. She's got her own podcast. But the Free Press is an extraordinary success just about 3 years in. And the hiring of Bari to take a senior editorial position at CBS News potentially solves a lot of problems that have existed at CBS, but it also speaks to some larger issues. I'll get to the larger issues in a minute, but first let's talk about CBS. CBS News is no doubt one of the storied top 10 news organizations in the history of the modern United States. Back in the glory days, Severide and Cronkite, et cetera, they were a powerhouse and they dominated the national news landscape along with just a handful of other organizations. But during the course of my career, CBS News has been somewhere between irrelevant and a joke, primarily because of several factors that afflict lots of news organizations. But whereas ABC and NBC have thrived during the last, say, 40 years, CBS has not. They've been way too liberal, and they've not been part of the conversation. I remember in 2000, when I was on the ground in Florida covering the Bush-Gore recount, ABC, NBC, CNN had huge presence on the ground, and CBS was virtually invisible. They've been uncreative in their programming. Their morning show and their evening news shows have been low rated. They have not been good on digital for the most part. They have been a news organization in serious decline. The two entities that are described as the crown jewels of CBS News, where people say, well, the rest of CBS might have declined in terms of relevance and ratings and credibility. 60 Minutes and Sunday Morning. I take exception there. First of all, Sunday Morning is a really well-produced show, but they're not holding powerful interests accountable to the public interest. They're just telling stories about babbling brooks and authors who are friends with the host. So it's a good show, but it's not a journalistic powerhouse. And then 60 Minutes has done more to discredit the media as liberal than any other entity in the country because of their reach. And while, again, it's a well-produced show, it's got good ratings, it is not a program that has brought credit to the reputation of CBS News as a fair place when it comes to political coverage or coverage of corporations or other areas. So CBS News is in bad shape, and it was purchased by someone in Ellison who wants to have a strong news division. He wants CBS News to thrive, and he's not an idiot. He's got eyes and ears, and he can see CBS News has been a disaster. So he's buying a tarnished property, and he's trying to figure out how to fix it up, how to take what is the strength of CBS News, which is the extraordinary reach that it has, and something where if you put money behind it, you can grow it. And he's brought in Bari Weiss. Bari Weiss is an extraordinary person. and an extraordinary force in journalism. She's an independent. She started the Free Press as an independent organization with investment from some very wealthy and very smart people who saw the potential of the idea. But she also understands legacy media. And I'm not going to compare myself to Bari because Bari is legend. But I understand where Bari's coming from, in part because I now have gone to independent media, but I also understand legacy media. I was in legacy media longer than Bari, but Bari at the Wall Street Journal, at the New York Times, is a student of media, really understands the weaknesses of legacy media that she'll confront at CBS News when she starts this job next week. But she also understands the strengths. Legacy media still has some strengths, which I'll talk about. Now, why did Bari leave the legacy media? Why did she leave the New York Times? They treated her horribly. And not only did they treat her horribly with a woke mob criticizing her on internal Slack channels and threatening her, but then they didn't cover the story, and they still aren't covering the story correctly. They're still whitewashing the circumstances under which Bari left the Times. She left the Times because a woke mob chased her out. And rather than leave journalism, or rather than be traumatized by it to the point of inaction, she built the Free Press. In 3 short years, she built an organization that is a real deal. And part of the deal with CBS, not only are they getting Bari to be the editor-in-chief, they're purchasing the Free Press. So now the Free Press will have access to all sorts of things as it has a partnership with CBS. How did Bari do it? First of all, she's brave. She demonstrated that by standing up to the bullies at the New York Times and writing a scathing departure letter. But she's also was brave to say, I'm going to start my own thing. She's tough. She's not afraid to take things on, tough enough to go pitch Silicon Valley millionaires and billionaires and get the funding to start this. She's creative. She thinks anew. What the Free Press has done is innovative, but also goes back to basics, right? They're text first. They write really provocative, interesting stories in text, old-fashioned, but it works, and she's done it in a creative way. And she's talent first, and that's been my philosophy throughout my career. Bari has hired great people. She's hired young people, old people, liberals, conservatives, people with a lot of traditional experience, people with no traditional experience. She has an eye for talent, and boy, does CBS News need that. And she cares about facts. Bari is an old-fashioned journalist. Finally, a business model. Think of that. If you're going into leaving legacy media, where there is no clear business model, and you're going into new media, some people make the mistake of saying, well, it's independent. Do I need a business model? Nah, you do. Bari found a business model at the Free Press. She gave the access away to people who couldn't afford it, but she's built up a huge network of paid subscribers who pay for her content in a way that has made it hugely profitable. Some people say it makes $20 million a year, pretty good for a startup. Now, the people on the left are howling, the guardians of the status quo at CBS and elsewhere, saying Bari is a threat to CBS. So Bari, again, who's no dummy, wrote a note to her new colleagues, and she laid out her 10 principles that Bari says are vital for a good news organization and vital to her and her sensibility. So I want to read to you Bari's very elegantly written, very brief rules. Number 1, journalism that reports on the world as it actually is. Hard to disagree with that or any of these. Journalism that is fair, fearless, and factual. Journalism that respects our audience enough to tell the truth plainly wherever it leads. Journalism that makes sense of a noisy, confusing world. Journalism that explains things clearly without pretension or jargon. Journalism that holds both American political parties to equal scrutiny. Journalism that embraces a wide spectrum of views and voices so that the audience can contend with the best arguments on all sides of the debate. Journalism that rushes towards the most interesting and important stories, regardless of their unpopularity. Journalism that uses all of the tools of the digital era. Journalism that understands that the best way to serve America is to endeavor to present the public with the facts first and foremost. Anyone who knows Bari Weiss's career and has looked at it seriously will not be surprised by those 10 rules or how sensible they are or how needed those exact rules are, not just by CBS News, but by pretty much everybody in the legacy media. So rather than say, hey, we've got a decades-long record of failure here at CBS, our new boss seems to have a direction to try to make the news division relevant and popular and successful. Rather than welcome that, how has Bari been received so far? This has been rumored for a while, so these sensibilities are not new. But in the wake of the formal announcement, here's what some people said. This is from The Independent, a quote from a CBS News staffer. CBS is not a good place right now. People are literally freaking out. People are using words like depressing and doomsday. It feels like some sort of doomsday. Okay, that's what they're saying to the people at The Independent. Doomsday. You know what doomsday is? Doomsday is what CBS News has been in the past. Bari Weiss coming in, rather than freaking out, they should be celebrating. All right, here's another reaction. This is from a guy named Walker Bragman. Not really sure who he is, some independent journalist. Everyone at CBS News should quit in protest. This is travesty. Bari Weiss is a misinformation peddling right-wing operative. She's totally unqualified for this job. Again, totally unqualified for the job. The people who've run CBS News into the ground for several decades. Everyone should quit in protest. I think Bari would probably welcome anyone who would quit over the arrival of Bari Weiss. Probably will save her the trouble of having to fire them. And the notion that Bari is a misinformation peddling right-wing operative. I don't agree with everything in the free press. If I did, it would be boring to read. Right-wing operative, no. Bari's for common sense. Bari is not a right-wing operative, and you can, on any given day, go to the Free Press website and read lots of things that people on the right will not like. That is Bari. Here is the very famous Nicole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times. Here's what she says about Bari. In case it wasn't clear, the anti-DEI crusade has never been about merit. Zero news experience, never been a reporter. Elevated to editor-in-chief of CBS News, one of the most storied institutions in the nation. Well, I don't know how long the statute of limitations is on storied, but again, this comes at a time when CBS needs help. Bari, zero news experience. No, actually, Bari has lots of news experience, and the proof is in the pudding. Bari has built, in 3 years, a very successful news organization that breaks the mold, changes the terms of the debate, and changes the game. Finally, what would be a chronicle of the failure of the left to understand what time it is without the inclusion of the estimable Keith Olbermann? Here's his tweet. I'd like to congratulate CBS News on hiring as editor-in-chief the dumbest person in America, Bari Weiss. Dumbest person in America. Again, if I were inclined to be critical of Bari, and I'm not, I'm quite fond of her, dumb would not be the word I would use. And Keith Olbermann, who's made a career out of calling people the worst and the stupidest, Keith Olbermann is not as smart as Bari Weiss. I'll leave it at that. Finally, Keith Olbermann says to folks, you should sell all the station's equipment and furniture. There is no recovery from this. Murrow, Cronkite, and even Katie Couric would now deny they ever worked there. There is no recovery from this. Again, the irony of all these criticisms is so rich. No recovery from what? No recovery from the august position that CBS News finds itself in. I have friends at CBS, and I don't want to say there's no one there of value. I respect the legacy and as a commercial enterprise of 60 Minutes, Sunday morning, super well-produced show. I'm not saying all their other shows are worthless. What I'm saying is they have been liberal, they have been legacy media, and they have been losing. And the people at CBS who want to keep losing should say, horrible that we're bringing in someone new. Horrible that we're bringing in someone with a record of success. Horrible we're bringing in someone whose 10 points of how journalism should work are a model for anybody, whether legacy or new media. This reaction is hilarious to me. And it's also dangerous. It's also dangerous because David Ellison, from what I've read about him, don't know the guy, he doesn't seem like he's going to be bothered by this criticism. In fact, it probably makes him feel like he's doing something right because he doesn't want a liberal organization and he doesn't want a place that is legacy in all the negative ways it's legacy. Liberal, but also no business model, no understanding of how digital works. So I can't swear that Bari's going to succeed, but this is important for CBS News. It's a moment for CBS News. And anyone at CBS News who's grousing to the media about how horrible this is, that Bari's right wing or Bari's inexperienced, you should give it a try. Your boss, Mr. Ellison, has decided this is the direction he wants to take the news division. And based on the available evidence, this is awesome for CBS. If I worked at CBS, I would be thanking him, and I'd be excited to see what Bari's going to do. But as I said, this isn't just about Bari Weiss and CBS. There's larger issues here that are massively important. And this is where my experience in legacy media and my appreciation for my business comes to bear. I love independent. I love the freedom. I love the ability to say and do what you want. I love the nimbleness of it. There's a lot to it, but there's also a lot to big places. And unfortunately, it's very hard to create a big place. I don't know that anyone will ever create from scratch a new organization that has the scale of the New York Times or CBS News. And what do I mean by scale? There's certain things that a serious news organization has to do if they want to hold powerful interests accountable to the public interest. Now, again, they should hold all powerful interests accountable to the public interest, not just some, not based on political party. What do I mean? Freedom of Information Act requests. The government, the law says if you want to ask the government for documents that are not public, they have to give them to you, but there are exceptions to it. Privacy, national security, etc. That law is, when I started in this business, we used it all the time. It's very hard to do in the digital age because you're busy. You're constantly needing to produce content. You need to sit down and type up a letter and say, "Dear Department of Treasury, I want the records of all meetings between Scott Bessent and Martians." And then you send it in, and then they say, "Well, we're going to take 7 years to respond to you." Or they say, "We're denying your request." Then you have to call your legal department and you have to say, "The Department of Treasury is withholding. Here's the letter they sent. They're not giving me the record of meetings between Scott Bessent and Martians. I want it. We should have it. I don't think they're right saying we can't have it or it's going to take 7 years." And then the lawyers have to go to court and they might have to appeal. That's expensive. You think independent organizations have that capacity? Almost none do. That's one. Foreign bureaus, right? You think Next Up has a Cairo bureau or a Nairobi bureau? We don't. Wish we did. You need scale to do things. Somebody bombs the federal building in Oklahoma City. Okay, an independent place could send 3 people. It's not enough. For a story like that, you need to send 24 people. Florida recount, same thing. These big stories that are compelling stories require a lot of people to tell them well, but to hold everybody accountable. What does this judge's ruling mean? How to explain it? What is this election official doing? Hold them accountable, ask them questions. To have that footprint, to have that capacity, to have that breadth and scale is something that most independent places can't do. It's vitally important. So my hope is, as I said, no one's going to create a new one. What is David Ellison doing? He's reinvigorating an old one. He's bringing in Bari. And again, I'm just going to assume the best because I know Bari's sensibility. He's bringing in Bari to say, let's take this husk, this old declined news organization with a storied legacy and lots of famous people who worked here with great records of accomplishment. Let's take what's good about it. Our affiliates around the country, a legal department, incredible hardware, an understanding in the abstract of digital. Let's take all that and let's reinvigorate it and let's make it great by adding in true journalistic sensibility and a business model that will work that includes appealing to everybody, not just liberals who aren't bothered by Dan Rather trying to destroy George Bush with forged documents. Let's take everybody in the country and consider them a potential customer. And let's produce a new product on the shoulders of what used to be a great place. That's what David Ellison is trying to do. He also, by the way, is thinking about buying Discovery, Warner Discovery, whatever it's called, Discovery Warner, I don't know, the place that owns CNN. He's talking about buying them too. And I can tell you, my gut would be if he bought that, Bari would be in charge of that as well. This is an incredible moment and a role model for places like NBC and ABC and CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post to say, we can have a functioning business if we think anew and we bring in people like Bari Weiss, creative, tough, brave, and understanding of the modern moment for media. Independent sensibility, harnessed to a big place, fantastic. There's signs the Washington Post is actually trying to do that. There's signs that the Washington Post is, they've had a house cleaning, lots of people have left. There's signs they want to change the way the Washington Post works to make it the way Bari Weiss will try to make CBS News, of interest to everybody and a fidelity to those 10 great principles. I'll tweet those out later so you can read them again. Bari Weiss has an opportunity to not just fix the CBS News, which needs fixing, but to set an example for all of the legacy media, all the people who own those places and run those places, to say, don't listen to the people who say this person's too inexperienced or too right-wing or too unqualified. Find great people, bring them in and empower them. Fix these great places, once great places, and put them in service of profit and potential and the capacity to appeal to the whole country. America needs great big news organizations as well as independents. Bari Weiss now can continue to run the free press and try to salvage what a once great place was, and again, set an example for the rest. Tell me what you think of today's report. You can send me an email. It's nextuphalperin@gmail.com. Always can find us on X, on Instagram, and TikTok. Our handle there is @nextuphalperin. It's @nextuphalperin there. Got it right. And don't forget, of course, the program's on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/@nextuphalperin. Like, subscribe, share, etc., etc. All right, next up here, the Michael Knowles of The Michael Knowles Show. That's next up. Hey, everybody, if you're 64 years of age or older, this is an important announcement. The Department of Justice recently sued 3 major Medicare brokers for claiming they were unbiased while allegedly pushing people into plans that got them, the brokers, the biggest kickbacks. It's true, so many insurance agents, they just can't be trusted, but you also can't necessarily rely on government information either. That's why I want you to know about something called Chapter. Chapter was started by people who went through this exact thing personally after their own parents were pushed into the wrong Medicare plan by an agent who was more focused on commissions than on good care. Chapter's mission is very simple: give every American the honest, straightforward Medicare advice that they deserve. And here's what makes them different. They're the only Medicare advisor that compares every plan all across the country, not just a few. That saves their clients an average of, get this, $1,100 a year. There's really no reason not to call. The process is quick and easy. They can review your options in under 20 minutes. And if you're already in the right plan, they'll let you know that. But if there is a better plan available, they'll help you make the switch. This could well be the most important call you make this year. So right now, dial pound 250 and say Chapter Medicare to get peace of mind. Again, dial pound 250 and say Chapter Medicare. Next up, and joining me now, the Michael Knowles, host of The Michael Knowles Show on the Daily Wire. Got to get both the thes in there. Michael, welcome back. Thank you for making time.
Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
How are things going over at the Daily Wire?
Oh, trucking along. We're selling our cigars. We're doing our shows. We're producing our movies. It's been good, though. Obviously, a pretty crazy start to the fall. Not just with the elections. Obviously, the murder of Charlie threw everybody for a loop. And I don't know. To me, it feels really like the entire political universe has shifted in a pretty fundamental way.
Yeah, I want to talk to you first about Charlie. How would you describe the arc of your emotions and thoughts from the day he was assassinated until today?
Yeah, it's ongoing. I mean, men never want to talk about their emotions or anything like that. But when I first got the news, I didn't think it was possible. I actually, when my producer came in and said Charlie has been shot at a campus, my first thought was, I hope his recovery is not too bad. I hope, I just hope it's, that's tough. That's a tough setback, but okay, I hope it's okay. It didn't occur to me that it was possible that he could have been killed. And then when that set in, happily, I didn't see the close-up video. I only saw the far-away video. I'm one of the only people, it seems, who didn't see the close-up video and obviously don't intend to. And then it was a real downer, for a few weeks. Those are the words McCartney used when Lennon was killed. It really messed me up. And at first I thought that it was mostly because we were pals for a long time. I don't think it was that, because I saw grown men who never met Charlie crying. Last night I was seeing some friends, some of whom knew Charlie, some did not personally know him. And we were talking about Charlie probably most of the night. I think that the personal friendship is a part of it for sure. I think it represented a fundamental national political trauma. And that is because of what happened, the fact that Charlie didn't hold public office, he wasn't passing bills, he was a debater, he just wanted to talk it out. And he was killed for that. I think that was shocking to a lot of people. And then, of course, the reaction, because the reaction ranged on the left from indifference to celebration. And that was true at all levels. It was true in the media. It was true in elected office. It was true of your normie cousin and classmate from the 10th grade on Facebook. And I think that really shocked a lot of people. And that was compounded by the surveys that came out later, especially by YouGov, that showed that the left is overwhelmingly more likely than the right to support and justify political violence. That was a shock to a lot of people. Maybe it wasn't a total surprise, but it was a shock. And so we're processing those sequential national traumas, and we're not going to get over it anytime soon.
How are you processing, not the people who celebrated his assassination, but how are you processing the lack of awareness on the part of so many otherwise well-informed Democrats who had either never heard of him or only faintly understood what his role was?
It shows you how segmented the media have become and the political culture has become. That they might, if they heard of him at all, it was because they saw some Media Matters clip where they took some line of his out of context. And many Democrats who were not very familiar with Charlie would come out and say, even if they weren't celebrating his murder, they would say, well, but he was a hater. And his legacy, you had an elected Democrat who said, his Ilhan Omar said his legacy, he was a hater. He spread hate. Ta-Nehisi Coates said this the other day in the New York Times. Oh, he spread hate. That's his legacy. And the irony of that is that's so beside the point, if that were true. Also, it wasn't true. Charlie was as gracious, as generous in debate, as moderate really as they come. And so I think that also was a trauma. Maybe that was the third trauma that came out of this, is a lot of people looking around and saying, wait, if they would excuse, maybe not even celebrate, though some did celebrate, but if they would excuse, if they would justify, if they would shirk and shrug off Charlie Kirk's murder, what would they do to me? What would they do if they knew what I think? I think that's what a lot of people thought about their coworkers and their classmates.
I want to drill down on Israel. It's such a confusing topic for me. I'm a student of MAGA. I'm a student of the constellation of MAGA talkers, you and Tucker and many others. Of course, Charlie was in that group. And the connection between Israel and internet and talk conspiracies about Charlie are just mind-boggling to me. But let's just start more basically, not on Charlie. How would you describe the camps within MAGA culture? And again, talking about Candace, Tucker, you, Ben, et cetera, the top 30 of you. What are the divisions over Israel, would you say? How would you describe whatever camps you think exist?
There are three camps on Israel, not just even among the talkers or the politicians, but among MAGA broadly. One camp says that the state of Israel can do no wrong. It's our greatest ally ever. It's the most moral nation in the history of the world. The other camp says...
Hold on. Who embodies the first one?
I think that is kind of the GOP establishment view, at least for the past 20 years. You saw a lot of this rhetoric coming out of the Bush era. I think that there are, I think that's the more maybe normie con.
Maybe Senator Cotton, would he be a spokesman for that point of view?
Yeah, sure. I don't want to put words in Senator Cotton's mouth, but I think that there are, even on the cable news networks, there are a lot of Republicans who are just reflexively pro-Israel. Maybe not even out of ideology, maybe just because until recently, you'd look on the right, 80% of Republicans were in support of Israel. So you'd say, well, it's an 80-20 issue. I'm going to be on the side of that. Even if they didn't hold, I don't know, a religious Zionist view or a...
Okay, so that's camp one.
Camp one. Camp two is that Israel is the cause of all evil in the world, and you stub your toe in the morning and it's Israel's fault, and it's this dastardly place. And I think that's typified again. It's not. There are plenty of Israel critics who are prominent, but I think that's really typified by Twitter. I would put Twitter and X in the year of our Lord 2025 is very much in that camp. That anything that occurs has to be caused by the state of Israel, and that America and therefore that America should decouple from Israel and foreign aid, at least Israel, or maybe to all of the countries. And there are all sorts of attendant ideologies that go along with that, be they nationalism, a paleo-libertarianism, or just a kind of cranky disdain for Israel. And then there's the third camp. which is the camp that I find myself in, which is the least popular view of all. And it says that one can be broadly supportive of Israel, recognize the reasons that the U.S. has an alliance with Israel, namely that Israel comes out of this gift from the British Empire in the early 20th century, and America is the heir to the British Empire, and we have been fighting with political Islam for roughly 1,400 years, so we're probably not going to become allies with everyone else there in the region, but Israel's interests diverge from those of the United States sometimes, and we need to keep them in check when those interests occur. That is the least popular view, the one that views geopolitics with any degree of nuance. And I don't know exactly why it is. Maybe it's just, look, the Jews are a peculiar people for all of human history. They're a people kind of called out and occupy, especially in the nation-state system, the post-Westphalian system. They are this, especially a unique people because they didn't have a state for so long, and then their state is born just 80 years ago, and through a UN declaration and a gift from the British Empire and through a war, and we just have a difficulty processing that.
I rarely have even the temerity to think about challenging Michael Knowles, like in front of the mirror at home. But I'm going to challenge you here because the way you've codified this, I say respectfully, almost everybody we know is in the middle camp. But there are divisions within the middle camp.
I don't think so.
Well, I mean, Ben,
I'm
Tucker,
being slightly hyperbolic.
Candace,
on my...
I mean, there's some divisions. There's got to be some divisions in that second camp.
No. I'm being slightly hyperbolic in my descriptions, obviously. But I would say, no, Tucker and Candace are quite clearly anti-Israel. I think that's fair to say. I don't think they would dispute that. And I think my colleague Ben or Mark Levin would probably be pro-Israel. And then some people are a little more in the middle. Like, for instance, I personally criticized the Israeli government on when the Holy Family compound was hit, or when St. Porphyrius was hit, because I have a personal interest in the protection of the Christian holy sites. I'm not saying that the State of Israel did it on purpose. They claim it was an accident, but they can't be making these kinds of accidents, especially when the United States is funding the war, and especially when the continuation of the war imperils the global order. So again, that's not to say that I'm siding against Israel or anything like that, but it's to recognize that we have to circumscribe some of those actions.
Right.
I think that's firmly in the middle.
Yeah. I agree. And you're a fact-based person and can understand nuance. And you're right. That's maybe a dangerous place to be. But I guess let me try to get at it this way. I try to like everybody. I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So people are sending me, as they are sending you, I'm sure, maybe not as much, all these quotes of Charlie's, some of which are I totally out of context. And I see from a minute, because I'm familiar with them, no, that's out of context. Some of them lack nuance. Some of them maybe were a one-off, and I say, he was on a live show and he said something, and maybe, he didn't mean to say it. And in some cases related to Israel, I think the evidence pretty clear that he didn't mean to say it. But there's this more broadly than Charlie. There's all of this attempts to say Tucker's an anti-Semite, or say Candace is even more of an anti-Semite, or to look at things that I've said or you've said, almost anybody, but particularly people like Tucker and Candace. And I'm just trying to understand what drives that, and are they, I'm not asking you to speak for them, but do they seem immune to that criticism? Like, well, obviously, it's weird to for you to say about people they're anti-Israel. That's a pretty strong thing, but on the available evidence, it's not an unreasonable position to take.
Well, I also don't think that being opposed to the State of Israel or something is necessarily beyond the pale or immoral or anything like that. To be an anti-Semite, I mean, to like truly have a deep-seated hatred of Jews.
But we're having a conversation. I'm not interrupting. I always like to say I'm just having a conversation. You know that we know many people who equate a sensibility which seems anti-Israel with anti-Semitism, that there's no difference between those two things, not because they think they're actually equal, but they say anyone who says the things that Tucker and Candace say about Israel must be anti-Semitic.
Or even, someone hurled this at me the other day because maybe it was when we were talking about the Holy Compound attack. I said, we really got to cut this out. They need to wrap up the war. And, I forget. It was that, or it was some, I think it might have been because I defended Pius XII and some crazy people were calling. Anyway, sometimes that word is bandied about, and I thought, listen, guys, if I'm your enemy, you don't have any friends. Okay,
Right.
this is not, I promise you, I'm not your enemy. Now, to your question on are people immune to this kind of accusation, I would say, look, Tucker and Candace, obviously, their ratings are through the roof. So they have lasting power. I don't think those attacks have damaged them all that much. But why are these things bandied about? I don't know, because it's politics, and people try to cudgel their ideological opponents over the head. So I'm not really surprised by that at all. The more interesting question is, why has Israel become a wedge issue on the right? It had not been for my entire life, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think the answer is simple enough. One, because the 2016 election did represent a shifting of the political order. And in that shifting of the political order, there is always going to be new ideas that crop up. It's not to say that Trump is anti-Israel in any way. Trump has a town named after him in Israel. It's just to say that the kind of Bush-era consensus, which grew out of the Clinton-era consensus, which was really just kind of like an extension of Reaganism, that really did get upended on trade, on immigration, on foreign policy. And so it's no surprise that new ideas cropped up. Why is it?
But just all the things you just listed, the new ideas are Trump's positions. And
Except
yet on
for
Israel, well, that's right. So I take your theory that things are kind of scrambled, and there's no doubt that that's a big part of it, as well as events on the ground.
Yeah.
But why is so much of the party, not just grassroots, but some of the talkers, why are they not disciples of Trump on Israel?
Well, the other issue where I think it's not quite in line with Trump is immigration, because Trump moved the position from, just open borders, essentially, even the libertarians defending that, to legal good, illegal bad. But we're going to have more legal immigration than ever. Trump has campaigned on that. I think a lot of the base actually says, no, we need to drastically reduce all immigration.
Good point.
So on that issue, they've gone a little further. On Israel, though, I think the obvious answer, and we're speaking on the second anniversary of the October 7th attack, it's because of the war. It's because the war is in the news and people get war fatigue. This war has gone on for a long time. Some of the aims of the war are a little unclear. Is the war about getting the hostages back? Is it about disarming Hamas and removing them from power? Is it about regime change in Iran? There seems to be a kind of floating target here that has exacerbated war fatigue. So I think that's really the issue. And I strongly suspect that once this war ends, if it ever ends, I suspect the Israel issue is going to diminish again in importance for a lot of conservatives, and a lot of those divisions are going to be, if not go away entirely, they're going to substantially heal.
The shift on public opinion, not just on the right but on the left over Israel, is staggering.
Yeah.
How much sensibility there's that's anti-Israel. Is it tempting? And again, I won't ask you to name specific people, but is it tempting, do you think, to people to make their living off of catering to that change in public opinion? Is that a temptation?
Of course, on both sides of the aisle, of course that is the case. Yeah. I mean, I've thought about it myself. I'm sure I'm happy with my ratings as they are, but I'm sure my ratings would be much higher if I followed these fads, these ideological trends that crop up. I don't think it's the right thing to do, so I'm not really all that tempted by it. And I'm with Dean Inge and Fulton Sheen. If you wed the spirit of the age, you'll find yourself a widow in the next. Right. I think a lot of it's driven by social media. A lot of it's driven by TikTok. Part of why I could never really get on board with going that hard on Israel, I can criticize Israel, I can disagree with even foundational ideological concepts like religious or historical Zionism, but I can't really go anti-Israel because I just can't be on the same side as Greta Thunberg. I can't be on the same side as Islamists, because October 7th, we will recall, is also the anniversary of the Battle of Lepanto, Our Lady of Victory, an improbable victory of the Holy League over the Muslim Turks. We've had divisions between the East and the West for a long time too. So I think that, yes, people can try to court that audience. But then the problem, of course, is there is audience capture. And so at a certain point, if you've cultivated an audience that just wants you to ever more side with Greta Thunberg, you're going to find yourself in a very awkward position, especially if you're on the right.
People in the what I call the dominant media like to stoke divisions within MAGA, right? That's part of their craft. But the divisions on this seem both real to me substantively, but also very personal. And again, I base that in part on just the stuff that shows up in my inbox of invective against people who I've known to be allies. What do you think Charlie would say about what's happened regarding Israel and impressions about him and Israel since he was assassinated?
Well, I'm certainly reticent when it comes to speaking for Charlie. Obviously, I think a lot of people are trying to put their ideas in Charlie's head. But I'll go so far as to point out the biggest political loss with Charlie, not the personal loss, but the biggest political loss with the death of Charlie is not the debates, it's not the speeches, it's the coalition. Charlie uniquely was able to maintain a conservative coalition. He frankly did it better than President Trump, and Trump's good at it too. So this is also why there will be people on both sides of any issue. So Israel, because we're talking about it, but other issues too, where they'll say, Charlie was on my side. No, Charlie was on my side. And, having been friends with the guy for a long time, I'd say he was probably trying to keep this team together, and he was doing his best to make sure that everyone plays nicely and not to alienate one faction or the other. But there is no doubt that Charlie was displeased by the names being bandied about, and he said as much publicly, and it's unfortunate.
Your point about Charlie, I'll say it slightly differently, but only to emphasize it because it's so important for people to understand. He understood what the traffic would bear on 3 different related realms. He understood what the traffic would bear on issues. Where's public opinion? What does President Trump think? Where's Congress? What will the traffic bear for a consensus position? Then what will the traffic bear in the media? He understood a very sophisticated way, like what can we get through? Not just the conservative media, but we have to get through the New York Times on some level. He understood what the traffic would bear, and then finally, and I think this was a gift of his. He understood what the traffic would bear in terms of personality and humans. He understood how far you could push Donald Trump, how far you could push Tucker. He understood people so well, and that high human intelligence, and bring those 3 things together. As you said, that's how you keep a coalition together, because there are people who have 2 of those 3 understandings, and it's not as powerful. But if you have all 3, it's a gift, and it really, as you said, superior to President Trump. I think in 2 of those 3, superior to President Trump. I think on public opinion and on the media, I think superior to President Trump.
Yes, without question. And it's important to remember that politics is a team sport. So, some people will say, this coalition building, these compromises, this is somehow disreputable, and, I have my pure principles, and no, politics is a team sport. And to quote Cocaine Mitch McConnell, the winners go to Washington and the losers go home. So I don't have much quarter for the dime store philosophers who have their ideological purity on Twitter but can't actually do anything in politics. And the fact is, Charlie was able to build and maintain a large coalition that was extremely effective, that moved the youth vote 10 points from 2020 to 2024. And on certain issues, even recognizing that an issue like the state of Israel, or an issue like tariffs, say, or an issue like, I don't know, even industrial policy, that these issues don't need to make or break a coalition. There can be some conciliatory middle ground to make sure that we don't lose the whole team.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when I said better than President Trump, that was high praise, because President Trump was extraordinary at those things. I wasn't denigrating him. I was elevating Charlie. All right, rapid round on the Democrats in 28.
Yes.
I'll name a Democrat who might run for president, and you just say yes or no. In your estimation, can they be the nominee? Okay. Not will they, but are they plausible to be the nominee?
They populate, yes.
Okay, here we go. Gavin Newsom.
Yes.
Kamala Harris.
No.
J.D. Pritzker.
No.
Governor Shapiro.
No.
Governor Beshear.
Yes.
Ro Khanna.
Yes.
All right, so Ro Khanna is yes and Governor Shapiro is no.
Yes.
Explain that, please.
The Democrats don't like the Jews anymore, if you want me to put it bluntly. That's why he wasn't picked to be the running mate by Kamala in 2020.
I don't think that I respectfully dissent from that based on my reporting, but okay.
Really? Yeah. You're saying that's not why.
That's not why
she overlooked him. Yes,
she actually.
But you would agree with me.
I agree with you that being a Jew is probably not a plus at this point. But I think everybody, there are no perfect candidates. Kamala Harris's book is much derided, but her explanation of why she didn't pick Governor Shapiro is actually, I believe, true. Matches my reporting. But leaving that aside, why yes on Ro Khanna?
Ro Khanna, I think he ideologically matches. You know, he's got a decent look to him. I think the Democrats are probably done with women for the moment. Hasn't worked out past couple times they've tried it.
Yeah.
I think, you know, look, Newsom thinks of himself as the front runner. He keeps getting squeezed, though. I don't know. He's got a good look to him, but he keeps getting squeezed. He tries to moderate. He's going to be friends with Charlie Kirk. He's going to be friends with Steve Bannon, but also he's going to, you know, tweet death threats at President Trump or something. It doesn't. Ro Khanna seems to have a little more stature to him or something, a little more dignity in his comportment, a little more ideological clarity. The other guys, Pritzker, not a chance. Doesn't.
Yeah. Wes Moore.
I
yes
don't
or
know.
No?
Yes.
Okay. AOC.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did I leave anybody out? Did I leave anyone you're bullish on?
No. Some people are bullish on Whitmer. I don't see it. Some people are bullish on Mayor Pete. Not a chance. But AOC has a real chance. AOC, you know, to quote Cardinal Manning, there is a day to come that will reverse the confident judgments of men, and the people who underestimate AOC, I think, will be embarrassed.
Do you think she could win a general election?
Under certain conditions that are not implausible. I think that the next 3 years are going to go pretty well, and I think therefore JD will be the Republican heir apparent, and right. I think he'll be very popular. If the economy were to tank, let's say, if the federal government were not to manage social unrest very well, like in the cities, then you could, I mean, look, we're in a position right now where Jay Jones, the Democrat AG candidate in Virginia, can fantasize about murdering a Republican and his kids, and he won't lose a single endorsement. So we are at a point where the politics are spiraling into a kind of radicalism that would make AOC look positively moderate.
Yeah. Which member of the Trump cabinet would be best equipped to play himself or herself in a movie?
Pete Hegseth, of course. That's not even a question.
How about Secretary Noem?
Noem. Listen, Noem has a great movie star look to her, but
neither of those is the correct answer. Neither of those is the correct answer.
What's the answer?
The correct answer is Sean Duffy. Correct answer is Sean Duffy. Come on, he would make a great Sean Duffy in the movie.
He would make a great Sean Duffy, and I guess you're right. He's a little less exaggerated in some of his
there's some
oratory.
Nuance.
That's true. Yeah. You're right. It's more method acting. He's more of a
little like a Rob Lowe, Rob Lowe, whatever. Love having you on. I'm trying to figure out how to make you a regular.
I'm in. Sign me up. I'm here.
Right.
This is pretty easy, and it's wonderful to be on, Mark, as always. Thank you for having me.
And I nod as if I understand your religious allusions, your historical references. I nod knowingly. Yes. I was just going to say that.
Oh, yes, of course, the Battle of Lepanto, yes.
Yes. Michael Knowles of The Michael Knowles Show, but it's like the Ohio State. We call him The Michael Knowles. Very grateful to you for coming back.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to see you next time.
Okay. Next up, Democratic strategist, former advisor to Bill Clinton, Doug Sosnik. Stay with us. That's next up. I want to tell you all about the Vapor Technology Association. It's an organization started nearly a decade ago to protect the rights of Americans who choose alternatives to smoking and the small businesses who have made a living using this technology. They support science-based policies and the rights of adults to make healthier choices. Did you know that many family-owned vape shops and manufacturers across the country are now under attack thanks to what are outdated Biden-era regulations that threaten to wipe out an entire industry? The Vapor Technology Association, also known as VTA, says businesses are being destroyed and people are losing their jobs. But the VTA says President Trump has a clear opportunity now to change this and to protect Americans' right to make their own choices and to defend small businesses and restore a fair and free marketplace. Head over right now to vaportechnology.org to learn more about that organization and why they are leading the charge to support American innovation. And if their mission appeals to you, consider becoming a member when you get to the site. Again, that's vaportechnology.org. And when you get there, tell them you heard about all this on Next Up. Next up, more politics. I've known of my career a lot of the smartest people in both parties, and there is no one smarter than Doug Sosnik, longtime political advisor to President Clinton. That tells you what you need to know because Bill Clinton's pretty good too. And he took advice from Doug and he joins us now. Doug, thank you for making time.
Great to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me. I would say, to be more accurate, that President Clinton occasionally took advice from me. But anyway,
Yeah,
thank you.
even once. If anyone he asks even once means they're pretty good. So thank you. How did you become an expert in American politics, would you say?
Well, I think what I did, I have a feeling it's probably similar to what you did, which is basically I decided in life to do what I was interested in, and figured that if I was interested in something, I was more likely to be good at it. And politics, which is really a young person's sport, gives you a lot more opportunities when you're young. So I started working on campaigns in college. And when I got out of college, I ran a campaign for Congress. And I've pretty much, with some breaks, which I think actually probably helped me by getting away from politics for a while, I've been pretty much doing it for over 40 years now.
Yeah. One of the things that you're, I would say, uniquely good at, but you're, again, as good as anyone, is you understand change, that the image of the parties changes, the technology changes, but there are some things that are immutable about politics in general, American politics. What's not different from when you started out in politics in terms of how to run and win elections, particularly presidentials?
Well, I think, look, just forget about when I started in politics. Just when I was in the White House a quarter of a century ago, that was a completely different era in American politics in so many ways, as you well know, having covered it. So in many ways, the world is completely different. It's one of the challenges that people have when they're covering campaigns, is to figure out how much of history in a period like this, how much of history can you go back and look at and have it apply to the present, and which parts of history now are no longer relevant. But I think that some aspects of winning elections is timeless, and it starts regardless of the media or any other kinds of changes in our society. It starts with the quality of the candidate, and running for president in particular. I don't think you can run for president without having a vision of where you want to lead the country, a positive vision, first of all. And secondly, I think that you need to be able to articulate that vision in a way that people can understand. Thirdly, I think people have to believe that what you are saying is something you actually believe and you're not just posturing. And lastly, I think they have to have confidence that you can actually implement what you are running on. And so I think those four factors are timeless.
Yeah. In that list, people talk about Donald Trump's winning 2 out of 3, and they often point to the fact that he ran against Hillary Clinton, who was a flawed candidate. And Kamala Harris, also a flawed candidate. Now everybody's flawed, as Bill Clinton liked to say. If you want a perfect candidate, vote for someone else. In my circle, we talk about what would have happened had Donald Trump run against Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or George Bush. Is it possible, in terms of understanding the dynamics of campaigns, to say, or is it too hypothetical and impossible to say whether those 3 guys could have beaten Donald Trump?
Let me just say for the record, I hate Donald Trump. I think he's an abomination, but put that aside. He's a spectacular political specimen.
Yeah.
And in his election in 2016, an underreported thing was one of the biggest problems Clinton had in 2016 was that our country doesn't want one party to have the White House 3 terms in a row. It only happened once since World War II, and that's when Bush won essentially for a Reagan 3rd term. But in 2016, I don't think anyone ever got elected president owing fewer people than Donald Trump. He didn't know bundlers. He didn't have a campaign apparatus. He did the entire thing on his own. And that's a spectacular achievement. But I think at the heart of your question, to be elected president of the United States, you have to be the right person at the right place at the right time. And if you take our country's history of over 200 years, I think the only time Jimmy Carter, for instance, could have ever been elected president was when he ran in 1976. And so I think timing is everything. And so in answering your question, I think it would depend on when the year was and where the mood of the country was. One last thing I'll say. I think Trump is a symptom of what's going on in America, not a cause. And a lot of what led to his victory in 2016 were things that had been forming in our country long before he ever thought about running. And so he tapped into that and in a sense accelerated these trends that they first surfaced in campaign, you covered in 1992. where I think that was the first time. Remember, politics is a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator of the state of America. But the grassroots working class revolt that Trump led, first time it showed up in American politics was in the 92 campaign, Buchanan's primary against Bush, the incumbent, and then Ross Perot getting almost 20 million votes. So I think Trump's timing was spot on in 2016. But in terms of the hypotheticals, I think you have to start with where the country is, the mood is, and what the country's looking for. And I might add, by the way,
Yeah.
if you took one word to describe Trump's campaign in 2016, I would say it was strength. And I think he used that as an antidote to what he perceived and many people perceived as the weakness of the Obama years. And so many times you'll see in American history, we tend to react to whatever our current president is. Every action creates a reaction, and often the country wants to rebalance itself as something opposite of the predecessor.
All right, I'll ask it this way, slightly different. Here's how I rank the last 5 presidents in terms of just political skills, all the things it takes to be a good, not just presidential candidate, but an effective president to get your agenda through. Here's how I rank them: Clinton, Trump, Obama, Bush, Biden. Agree or disagree?
I guess I mostly agree, but I think you have to look at your definition of, success as a president. And so for whatever reason, Trump lost his reelection in 2020. And, if you want to measure success of a president, the power of the office and exerting your will, then Trump is probably the most effective president in the history of the United States. If you want to measure a president by whether they're leading a country and whether a country believes and supports their president, then Trump is at the bottom of the list or right next to Biden.
Right.
So I think it really depends on what your definition is of a strong president.
Well said. I was thinking more of just in terms of the kind of political skills that help you get elected and help you in the office. But I take your point.
He's a spectacular political athlete.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it. He has the touch. He's a 78, 79-year-old guy that understands modern media or postmodern media. He doesn't he doesn't believe in the traditional tools of campaigns. He gives a speech, and whatever lines work is what he uses.
Right.
So every day is a focus group.
I think of the Democratic Party now in sort of 4 time periods: present, midterms, presidential, and then post-presidential, post-Trump. There's some similar challenges across all 4. I want to ask you about 2 of them. One is these voter registration numbers, where you see in lots of states more Republicans registering, more people registering as Republicans, fewer Democrats. Obviously, independents continue to grow as well. Is your sense that that's a problem that's happening organically, or is that something that Republicans are just organized to do?
It's probably both, but you have to understand there are leading indicators of politics and there are lagging indicators. I think voter registration is a lagging indicator of the mood of the country. And, I remember starting out in politics, when young people came on the scene, and you had Jimmy Carter defining what it meant to be a Democrat and Ronald Reagan defining what it meant to be a Republican. He had a whole generation of people who entered politics becoming Republicans because all they knew was Reagan and Carter. And so part of what's going on now is, I think, an era of all people know about politics. And a lot of these people who are starting politics is Trump and Biden or Trump and Harris. So I think that this is a lagging indicator, but it reflects the disarray of the party right now. The other trend, which I think is probably even more significant, although I don't want to diminish the trends you're alluding to, particularly in the 39 states that do party registration. But you look at the swing states of Nevada and Arizona and Pennsylvania and North Carolina, and those are significant advantages that the Republicans are enjoying now. And it's both. It's people both signing up to be Republican, but also a combination of people unsigning being a Democrat. But the other trend, which I think is probably most important, are people moving to independence, away from both the political parties. And you look, particularly as you go west of the Mississippi, and you look at places like Arizona, or the overwhelming majority of people now in Arizona are not affiliated with either party. But both of those trends I think are significant, and there's no way I can, as a Democrat, tell you that's a good sign.
Yeah. The other challenge so many people associated with President Clinton talk about is neither party has a monopoly on the extreme wing, being influential or taking unpopular positions because of the extreme wing. But a lot of people associated with President Clinton say the party's too far left now. It's got too many unpopular positions that are too far left, and too many of our elected officials, Democrats say, are afraid to stand up to that. I tell people all the time, particularly younger people who don't recognize the resonance of this. Bill Clinton in '92 was pro-death penalty, pro-right to work, pro-welfare reform, pro-free trade, all positions that were way to the away from the base of the party. And yet he figured out a way to make those positions sellable to win the nomination, and then, of course, helped him in the general. Is that a formula that could work, and is that a necessary thing for the party's nominee in 28 to do?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of ways you can look at this that are simple. One is which of the two parties' wings are more extreme, and whichever one's acting more extreme is probably the party that's going to lose. The other, though, is, and I think this helped Clinton in 91 or 92, is how much, what's more important to a party, the activists? Is it more important to be right in their mind, or is it more important to win an election? And I think by 91, the party was so tired of losing that it was a better environment for Clinton to take on some orthodoxy and not be a slave to the constituency groups. If I could just take your four buckets for a moment, I'll just quickly. So bucket one is the present, and this is what happens when you lose elections. You have no leader. Bucket two are the midterms. And I think that the midterms will have very little to say with what happens in 2028. If you look at the two biggest midterm elections since World War II in '94, when the Republicans took the House back and over 50 House seats, and I think 7 Senate races, in 2010, when the Republicans won over 60 House seats, 7 Senate races, 10 governorships, the Republicans lost the White House 2 years later in 96 and 2012. So I don't think you should look at 2026 as any sort of tell about the future. And so your bucket three is the entire candidacy and outcome is going to be determined by who is nominated by which of these parties. And then bucket four is if Democrats take the White House back, then the person who was the nominee and elected president will define what it means to be a Democrat. If the Democrats lose in 2028, then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will probably be defining what it means to be a Democrat for the next 4 years, because that's what the Republicans will do. Jimmy Carter was president of the United States for 4 years, but he was president of the Democratic Party from '76 until Clinton won in '92. And the reason was the Republicans made sure that Carter defined what it meant to be a Democrat.
Do you fancy any of the prospective 2028 candidates to the point where you think they should be the nominee or likely to be the nominee, or is it more unsettled in your mind than that?
This is completely unsettled. It's the silly season. None of this. It's all tactic. It's all posturing. Yeah. None of this matters. I mean, my experience, Mark, is that there are two sort of things you need to do to be elected president. One is you have to be able to articulate, having your own mind and articulate why you're running and what you're going to do if you're going to get elected. And then the second is, can you demonstrate the temperament to take the pressures of a campaign? Because if you can't do that, how can you take the pressures of the office? And so when you're in the middle of a primary, going to 5 states in a day, you can't be formulating why you're running. So the most important thing anyone can do right now is figure out why they're going to run and be able to articulate that. And I'll just remind you, as someone who was there, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, when Clinton announced in '91 and Obama announced in '07, those guys were not very good candidates. But the process of running and their ability to articulate where they wanted to lead the country happened in that first phase. And I can, for Clinton, and you were probably there, a series of speeches he gave in Cleveland and at Georgetown in the fall of '91, he really captured in his mind his ability to articulate why he was running. And the same, I think, the moment for Obama was in the '07 JJ dinner in Iowa. So what I'm looking for now is not people who can get under Trump's skin and can build Twitter followings. I'm looking at who is trying to figure out if they're going to run, why are they running, and are they coming up with a way to articulate where they want to lead the country? That's the most important thing right now.
Yeah, it is. And of course, the daily coverage and a lot of reporters focus on the exact opposite. And it's not just who would be the strongest nominee or not just who would be the strongest nominee or most likely nominee. It's also who'd be the best president, which of course the voters respond to. And it's hard in the current environment to do what you're saying, but not impossible. People could give thoughtful speeches. They could spend less time asking people what they should run on and figuring it out themselves. You think about it as
just one thing. So, when you talk about the Democrats, we have no leader of the party right now. This is what happens when you lose elections. If you remember in 2009, after Obama won, the Democrats took Congress, and the Republicans were walking around in a daze.
Yeah.
So we as a party, the only thing we as a party can do, whether it's the congressional wing or all we can do between now and the beginning of the presidential race is try to lessen the burden of a candidate running with a Democratic label. All we can do is try to make that less of a burden for the nominee. That's all we can do. We can't, as an opposition party, define who we are or where we're going. So our whole job is to make us less toxic. And one of the most important things for 2026 for Democrats is just to have, and same with the governor's races this year, is to have proof of concept that we're not so toxic that we can't win elections. But that's really the only value that we can provide for the nominee.
It isn't part of the challenge. Maybe this is wrong or too obvious to say. Part of the challenge of Trump is he knows full well what issues Democrats are more unpopular on, like crime. And he knows how to put those things front and center and force the party to either be divided or cling to what are unpopular positions.
Well, yes, but. So, yes, that's true, but. So I believe we've been living in the age of Trump since 2015, when he rode down that escalator and announced his candidacy. So for 11 years, he's completely dominated American politics. We as Democrats, for 11 years, have not articulated a single positive agenda of where we want to take the country. It's all been about stopping Trump. And what Trump is so far has demonstrated, at least, is that he is a singular force in American politics. When he is not on the ballot, his appeal has not been transferable. And we are going to be moving out of the age of Trump with the 2028 election. It's going to be an open seat, and a lot of that race is going to be defined not by does Trump dominate the news cycle, but what is the state of America and what is the state of American economy? And that is going to be the setup. And Trump is winning most every news cycle, but ultimately his presidency and ultimately the outcome of the 2026 midterms, I think, will largely be determined by the state of the country, the state of the economy, and how people feel, not whether or not he can win news cycles.
Is it too soon to size up J.D. Vance as a potential presidential candidate?
I think it's. I guess in the one way it's too soon. On the other hand, I thought he was a colossal mistake when they nominated him, and I think it seemed like they had buyer's remorse. But I thought he proved to be a pretty effective candidate, and I think he's been an effective wingman as vice president. And in some ways, he can. I mean, I think that the Trumpism is mostly just an appeal to Trump. It's not really a philosophy. But to the extent that someone can articulate what does Trumpism mean, I think Vance probably does a better job of that than Trump. But I think it's far from clear if he has the kind of personal skills and ability to relate to people in the wings of the party. That's going to be the test of the campaign is the temperament. But I think he certainly, right now is best positioned of anyone in the Republican Party.
If you were an advisor to the Democratic version of Vance, a vice president who seems to have the full support of the president, chair of the RNC Finance Committee, would that be a perch from which you could consolidate a lot of advantages for 2028?
It will be, but I'll give you one prediction. It will be. And I think doing all the thankless tasks that Trump doesn't want to do, going to any meeting anywhere and meeting anybody, the funders, going out there and saying all the things that Trump wants is what Vance needs to do, and in a sense, he's going to have to be a duck, which is to say, above surface, he's very calm. He's vice presidential. That's his only agenda. But beneath the surface, that duck is paddling as fast as he can. And the real challenge is going to be that Donald Trump only is focused and cares about Donald Trump. Anything that detracts from that is something that Trump will take offense to. Anytime someone starts overtly running for president above the surface, not below the surface, take 2027, Trump is going to view that as a hostile act because it's going to make him implicitly a lame duck. So I think you're going to find, when I was in the Clinton White House, when Gore started running in 1999, I mean, it was just a normal thing. You just let it go. I think that Trump will be very punitive for as long as possible to not let anyone overtly run for president because it will diminish him in office.
Doug Sosnik, entering, I think, about your fourth decade as one of the top political strategists in the country and in your party. Grateful to you for making time.
Nice to see you. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Again, Doug Sosnik, just an extraordinarily smart guy, and I'm grateful to him for making time. That's it for today's show. We'll be back on Thursday, a brand new episode. Make sure you subscribe and download Next Up wherever you get your podcast. Watch us on YouTube. If you want to be here, if you want to know what's coming, next up.